Welcome to the All Ball Show, presented by Abstract Sports, where we bring sports back to life. I'm your host, Kyle Clay 2K. In the All Ball Show, we focus on basketball-only content, and to tip things off, I'm covering every single team in the NBA from worst to best in each conference. I'm going to look at their rosters and discuss how I think they're going to perform this upcoming season. And with this episode, we're finally breaking our way into the top 8 teams of the Western Conference. To tip it off, we are talking about the number 8 team in the Western Conference last year, the Minnesota Timberwolves. This Minnesota Timberwolves has a lot of promise, a lot of young talent, but usually when I say young talent, that implies that there's not any kind of veteran leadership that can help take them to the next level. I feel like that's redundant. I feel like I say that a lot, but it's things like that can really help develop a team around the right values that the veteran players have learned throughout their entire careers and help them translate it into their own game. And if they can all be doing that on the same page, they can be a really great team. But this is a team with Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, 3 very young all-stars, but very good all-stars who just need to piece it together, play together, and they can find success. The Minnesota Timberwolves are based out of Minneapolis. They are in the Western Conference, Northwest Division. Head coach is Tom Thibodeau. He's known for being a very hard-headed coach, but also high IQ, very smart. I feel like every coach has to be at least a little bit smart. They play at the Target Center. Owner is Glenn Taylor. General manager Scott Layden. And that's all for the fun facts from Wikipedia. The Minnesota Timberwolves had a record of 47-35 last season. They tied the Spurs record, but the tiebreaker gave the Wolves the number 8 seed. If they had went 1-1 in the regular season, then they would look at who won the division, who was highest in their division. That would determine the tiebreaker to send the one team to the playoffs. The thing that was crazy is that the Wolves sealed the deal on the last game of the season last year, pushing them to the playoffs and ending a 14-year playoff drought. But not only did they do that in the last game, it was a game in overtime against the Denver Nuggets. And that Denver Nuggets team we just talked about, they were one win off of getting into the NBA playoffs, and it was because the Minnesota Timberwolves took that from them in the final game of the season. Who said regular season games aren't fun? But one of the big reasons they were able to make a jump there at the end of the season to make the playoffs was because Jimmy Butler was finally back from injury. Just to take a glance at some of the things we're going to be talking about soon, Jimmy Butler played in 59 games, and those missed games came right up in the second quarter of the season. I remember it being a story where he wasn't going to be in the All-Star game because he was hurt, and he was hurt for a good chunk of games after that, and he came back just before the playoffs to help them try and do something against the Houston Rockets, who were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference in a very, very big way. But let's talk about their roster from last season, and maybe it'll help ring some bells on who was there and who wasn't. Only 16 players throughout the entire year, if that means anything. There's Cole Aldrich, Nemanja Bjelica, Aaron Brooks, Anthony Brown, Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Jimmy Butler, Jamal Crawford, Georgie Dieng, Marcus Georges Hunt, Taj Gibson, Tyus Jones, Shabazz Muhammad, Justin Patton, Derrick Rose, an MVP, former MVP, Jeff Teague, Karl Anthony Towns, and Andrew Wiggins. That may not sound like a lot to some people out there. Jimmy Butler is going on his 6th or 7th year this upcoming season, and he's just kind of exploded onto the scene these last few years. I mean, he's with the Bulls. He really proved he could hang in the NBA, and now he's being a lot more vocal in terms of off-the-court issues, and I'll get to that in just a minute as well. But he's also taking some of these younger guys under his wing and trying to help them learn, help teach them what he knows, and then hopefully put it all together on the court. But they have a guy on their team in Jamal Crawford. This guy has been 6th man of the year before, extremely athletic guard who can dribble the ball and put you on your ass. And that's no joke. He will break your ankles. That's also no joke. He might actually break your ankles. And some people might say that Derrick Rose isn't the same person or the same player, but he has shown flashbacks to the vintage Derrick Rose, but he was a big part of that season last year. Just to look at some of their numbers, the per-game numbers, I think Jimmy Butler is going to be way up there. 22.2 points a game. He had 5.3 rebounds, 4.9 assists. So obviously his score doesn't really impact so much in the other stat columns, but he has a lot of leadership on that team, and he pulls a lot of weight in that regard. Karl Anthony Towns with 21.3, and then you have 4 other guys in double-digit averaging points. Going on to the totals here that I've been covering every episode, we have 3 guys with over 1,000 points. You have Jimmy Butler with 1,300, and I think he missed out on a lot of points because of his absence from injury. Andrew Wiggins had 1,450, and Karl Anthony Towns with the most at 1,750-ish. And then 2 guys who were just off of the 1,000 mark at 999 and 994. Those were Taj Gibson and Jeff Teague. This team has shown they can hang in the NBA. The fact they were able to get that many wins in the Western Conference kind of blows me away a little bit. I mean, that Denver Nuggets team does look pretty good from last year, so the Timberwolves really did some damage here. I'll say even that Clippers team from last year where they had DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin for most of the year, Austin Rivers, I feel like they could be up there too, but they were 5 wins shy of the Timberwolves. The important thing is that they did make it to the playoffs as the number 8 seed, and they gave themselves a chance at trying to win a championship. Although it wasn't in the cards for them, they really did give it their best. I mean, what else can you do in a situation like that? You're coming in as the 8 seed with a record of 47-35, and you're going against the number 1 seed in the Western Conference who was 65-17. That's saying something. This team had the same number of losses as you had wins on the road. Yikes. The playoffs essentially broke down like this. The Houston Rockets had home court advantage, obviously, as the number 1 seed, and they took both of their first games at home. They go to Minnesota. Minnesota wins their first game, and everybody's like, oh, what's this? Oh, and then the Houston Rockets come back into Minnesota for the next game, for Game 4, and beat them, and then they beat them at home in Game 5. So, a little bit of excitement in Game 3, like, oh, are we going to exchange home games here? We're gonna go all the way to Game 7, maybe a big upset here in the first round? No, it didn't happen. The Minnesota Timberwolves' hearts were broken, and they were bounced early in the first round in 5 games. It's too bad. The Rockets did move on to take on the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, and they lost in a Game 7. I think I already mentioned the Game 7. Game 7s are really exciting. I mean, what can you say? The Rockets went on to a Game 7, and then the Warriors swept the Cavaliers in the championship. So Minnesota Timberwolves had a lot to get through, but it's cool that they were able to end the drought and put themselves in a situation where they can try to find success. That's all you can really want as a team. And as if all this success doesn't sound awesome and wanting to build on this and make it great, there's been some interesting drama this offseason, actually very recently with Jimmy Butler. When he came to Minnesota, he let the coaching staff and their admin know how he felt. He wants to be appreciated. He wants to get a lot of money. He feels like he brings a lot to a team. And I think his passion really shows on the court, and I think he's the biggest reason why they were able to get to where they were. If he was not injured at all this season, I think the Timberwolves could have, jumped up to the next rung probably. The way these teams were stacked in the Western Conference, only 7 wins separating 7 seeds, the Timberwolves could have easily jumped up to the number 3 spot. I mean, from there, you have to go up 9 more games to get the Warriors, so you're not going to get there. But they could have had the 3 spot if Jimmy Butler was there. That's crazy to think about. Jimmy Butler shows up to practice for the first time just about not too long ago, and goes off in practice. He's talking trash to everybody. He's challenging everybody. And he even ran a game against the starters with the bench riders and beat them. Instead of stretching with the team after practice, he just dipped. He said, see you later. But the whole time, he was like yelling at their coach, Tom Thibodeau, and other administrative executives and saying, you need me. You can't win bleep without me. And that's kind of the gist of how that went. The next day, the Timberwolves canceled practice. But Andrew Wiggins has spoken out, and he has said that you want to have a guy on your team like Jimmy Butler because he's going to do everything for you to try and win. I think his teammates want him to get paid. I don't think it's anything that has to do with his teammates. I think that Jimmy just wants to show the people who are paying him that he deserves more money because he brings so much more to the table. And I don't question it. I think Jimmy's all in the right here. I think the way he went about it was a little bit weird, and I think he agrees to that. But he just thinks that something had to be done. He's going to be honest. He's going to be himself when he's out on the court. So that's what you got. Just straight up Jimmy Butler. He even told you so in the interview with Rachel Nichols. But let's take a peek at what this next year's roster, this upcoming year's roster, looks like for these Timberwolves. You got a lot of people returning from what I can tell at a glance. You got Andrew Wiggins. I'm just going to say some names, not all of them. Karl Anthony Towns, Tyus Jones, Jimmy Butler will be there. Justin Patton, Jeff Teague, Taj Gibson. Derrick Rose will still be there. Then you have Anthony Tolliver coming in from a different team, Luol Deng, a few other guys who are still there, but a bunch of new faces as well. Assuming that this drama that Jimmy Butler had with their coaching staff and whatnot doesn't blow up into some crazy thing, I think the Timberwolves will have a fire about them this year. And in the Western Conference, you need something extra to propel yourself. Those bottom teams there going to be shifted around a little bit more this year. That fire, that passion is something that can get you over that hump. And I look forward to seeing Jimmy Butler play this year for the T-Wolves. And that does it for this episode of the All Ball Show presented by Abstract Sports. How do you think the Timberwolves are going to do this season? Please let us know your opinion in the comments down below. Hit that like button and also subscribe if you want to get more basketball content throughout the season. I'm your host, Kyle Clay 2K. I'll see you in the next one.